Hey, it's the first day of lockdown in South Africa, and it's the first day of the Making Peace with Your Fat Mind Lockdown 2020 conference that I'm doing as a means of helping you get through the next 3 weeks ahead. So the procedure is it's going to be online chats, conferences, these kind of things, but they will be recorded, and then you can watch them at your own leisure and tap along and do the things that I kind of advise you to do. So the way ahead, what I would plan on doing is I just want to tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, what you can expect, so that you're not too apprehensive and not too fearful. Something else to add to the fear factor, which is pretty dominant in the energy of the globe, but particularly in South Africa, because we're in this unusual state of making history. And in making history today, let's see if we can make a big dent into that old belief systems of ideas in your mind that you have about yourself. So basically, my name is Cathie van Rooyen. I've done energy tapping since 2001 is easier than me trying to work it out. I was introduced to a variety of different therapies through the years, and I found that being a very sensitive person, very emotional person, I was always, and I still am, very, very curious and searching for ways to improve myself, because probably as a little girl, I had this belief that I took on that I wasn't enough and that I had to do better, be better in order to be a certain way. So I'll go more into my detail about my eating process and my mind, my fat mind with regards to food and everything as we go along. So basically the energy tapping that I'm going to be introducing to you is very unusual, but it's basically calming the body down with relation to what's going on in the mental imagery. So it's nothing to be scared of, it's nothing too unusual. It's just really getting your body to understand, hey, I want to be better. Because as we go along, I'll explore and explain the different kinds of mental belief systems that we've picked up along the way. Sometimes in society, and we like to blame society, and we like to blame other people. But when you understand yourself, like I now know that I'm a very sensitive person, and I used to take things, although very seriously, I've got a wacky sense of humor. So that's almost contradictory. But when the biology of belief, that I want to believe something, is so intense that I would believe a lot of young things at the time when I was a little girl. And I often explain that when we're young, our brain waves are moving at a much slower vibration, believe it or not, up until the age of about 7 or 8, when we start really getting filtered through by what our society, schools, family wants us to believe. Up until then, we've had a much more innocent view of the world, because everything's getting new, everything's getting imprinted into our mind and into our psyche. So we have to learn how to walk, we have to learn how to crawl, and all these have got a mechanical element as well. So I find that a lot of the times in our modern society, in the Western society, we forget that there is this mechanical element to our physiology and our learning. So yes, we learn how to walk, but until you've had an accident or something when you're older, you don't actually how much mental effort it takes into moving one leg, one arm, moving forward, lifting your head, and all that kind of mechanisms. Now that is a spill-on effect, because in my therapy rooms and the clients I've come across through the years, a lot of the times when they want to stop smoking, and I say, well, what are you going to do with your hands? And they'll go, well, what do you mean? But your hands used to doing this every day. So the same way as people biting their nails, or I'm a very face touchy person, and we're not supposed to touch your face through lockdown. And I just say, well, look, I'm not seeing anybody else in my space at the moment. So if it's on my fingers and I haven't gone out anywhere, then I'm going to get it, whatever. So that also goes back to the belief systems. But there's a whole 21 days. You'll think, how am I going to do this in 21 days? By the end of 21 days, we still won't get enough, because we're an ongoing work in progress. So basically, I'm going to be using energy therapies, a little bit of tapping, a little bit of other methods, a little bit. I'm going to send you questionnaires as the course progresses, so that you can get something written down for yourself to have some tangible, oh, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and I didn't know. Because sometimes when you write things out as well, it comes out in paper. A lot of the times therapy is saying, well, aren't we just feeling better because we're saying it out loud? Yeah. So we can say it out loud, we can write it down, and we can run it out. But what most of us have actually found is that we stuff it down, and we stuff it down with food. So basically, I try and get you to try and uncover what is it about me and what do I do when times are tough and where do I go? And fridge is a very common response to that. I go to my chocolate cupboard. So that's quite an individualistic thing. So we'll be looking at things. I'm just going to give you a course overview over what's going to happen what you're going to expect over the next 21 days. Like, how does your mind keep you fat? What is the mental image of your body, irrespective of the size that you have or the size that you're currently at? And this is quite an interesting thing, and I'll briefly touch on that a little bit later in this session. And why do you think you are this way? What kind of emotional scars, physical scars, mental scars are you carrying that maybe you find yourself thinking of yourself in this way? What kind of wounds do you have? I don't know how to turn the sound mechanism off, so you're going to have the beeping going through. What kind of wounds are you carrying through your life? What kind of fears do you have in response to life and the life that you've lived? How is your body responding to future fears? Because sometimes we find food and we'll look at emotional eating in a lot of detail. And what kind of beliefs are you holding with regard to your body size, body shape, expectations, societal expectations, and what happens when you get older, all that kind of thing, which we're not consciously aware of. It's not something we constantly think of in response to my personal body image. Okay, then this thing, which is what actually drove me to say I need to start this today, is what kind of lockdown fears are you having? Are you going to eat your way through it? What am I going to look like when I come out of it? It's going to be so difficult, and I need to eat because it's a way of comfort, it's a way of staving off the boredom, it's a way of company. And I think it's quite important for you to understand and not necessarily stop as much as become aware of. Because I'm not into stopping behavior from the onset. I'm into, oh, why am I behaving this? Because once your body and once your mind has a very plausible reason why you're behaving in a certain way, it's much easier to shift your behavior to something that's more self-serving in a more positive way, okay? So when do you go to food? What is your bad times of the day, month, week, year? What is your go-to? Where do you eat? Some people that eat secretly in the car on the way home from work, or they'll go. My mum, for instance, my late mum used to have a bag of sweets in her bedroom, and she'd sometimes go in and you would sometimes hear the plastic, and I'm going, why is she not sharing? But I mean, it was a big house. If she had to share, she wouldn't have any left. So that was her go-to place. We'd keep them in a secret place in her handbag. I have a chocolate cupboard, and having lived with an insulin-dependent diabetic all my married life, I knew, quite frankly, that cupboard was not going to be raided. But when I go away with some of my family members who are not diabetic, I kind of think, oh, I actually have to share. So basically, it's how you respond to your food and what kind of eating schedules do you have when it comes to your eating habits? Or do you only eat 3-4 meals a day when you're on, say, for instance, a diet? Or do you prefer one meal of a day? Or do you eat one meal a day, which is from morning to night? Or how do you feel? I need you to become conscious and to write down what is your day. I didn't realize this until I started looking at this, that I have kind of habit, I suppose, of every time I've eaten dinner or eaten an official meal, I need to have something sweet immediately afterwards. Now, biologically, there's probably a reason for that, and I could investigate, but right now, at the moment, I'm just saying, okay, I'm having my chocolate or treat. Okay. And then also, in this process, I think it's quite important, and I will be looking at it, but at a later stage, so don't get too panicky now, about mirror work and the importance of seeing yourself in a mirror. How does it feel? What kind of language have you had with you and this reflection of you? Now, I'm pointing to a camera, which is a different, we can look at that as well, because it's useful to have, if you're one of those people that want to do things online, or you want to be filmed for your work or whatever, and the camera is a big no-no. So I want to check your relationship with your reflection of self in a mirror and in a camera. And I'm currently doing a little selfie challenge as well, which is quite interesting for me because I've got to think about these things in a layered way. And that's what the whole process of tapping is. And the tapping comes from the emotional freedom techniques. It was devised in the late 90s by a psychologist in America who started looking at Chinese medicine. And he'd also had an interest in kinesiology and muscle testing and things like that. So basically, he had devised a method of calming the body down when his patients had a physiological response to something that was going on. So in this case, with the first is patient A, we could say patient 1, was she had a severe aversion to water. So much so that it was becoming such a bad phobia that on her way to his office, she had to pass a swimming pool and she was becoming almost quite, as she described it, sick to her stomach. And in that process, he remembered the meridian for the stomach is under the eye. And he had a flash of inspiration, and knowing from what he'd done with his kinesiology interest and hobbies, he says, well, how do you feel when you touch and you tap this part of your face? And luckily for us, she had such a fortunate response that it seemed to calm her body right down. And then he went on to develop a thing called thought filter. One of his students was Gary Craig, and he was an engineer by trade. And he was also a motivational speaker at the time, performance, very much into studying. He did a course through Dr. Callahan, and then he devised a method called emotional freedom techniques. And it was in those late years of the 90s that I started seeing his videos and DVDs and instruction manuals on many, many, many different cases that he had, and he was just filming all. And his premise at the time was go out there and everybody can try it, which everybody did. So when the internet started to take full friction, I would say, in the early 2000s, he developed them into DVDs, which meant that I could now finally watch them in South Africa. And that's how I learned my courses. And by that time, he was also inviting a whole lot of people that had been on his previous workshops who developed their own method of using the energy freedom techniques, the emotional freedom techniques. And they're called energy tapping, simple energy tapping. There's a whole world of cousins of the traditional EFT as Gary Craig started, because that was his premise at the time. Then at about, how long has this tapping summit been going on? Well, for however long the tapping summit has been happening, and that's run by a brother and sister, Erica and Jessica Hortner, and they had this brainwave of taking it to the world in what Gary Craig had instructed them to do, and they created their own way of reaching their clients, and it's had a phenomenal response throughout the world. Maybe you've seen it, maybe, and on that you hear the different cases that it's helped through the ordinary people like you and I across the world, and with marvelous results. So I had the privilege of being able to train with Gary Craig in 2005 at a EFT for serious illnesses workshop, which was really cool. But by then I'd already had my own Cathie stamp of how I do the tapping. Now, if you go to or if you Google online and you see any video, you will see the different range of methods of doing this. But the basic premise is get the awareness of the problem and do something physically while you're focusing on the problem at the same time, and we're working on the negative. So how we can use this, there's points as well, and I'll tell you this now, so if you find yourself craving over the next day before this you get a chance to watch this follow-up thing, there's a craving point, which if you were to look at, this point, so if you'd imagine like a triangle between your ring finger and your baby finger, there's a little triangle there, and if you tap there, I'm supposed to know the official name, but I don't. But if you tap there, anytime that you've got a craving, it can be craving for cigarettes, it can be craving for food, it can be craving for pretty much anything. The idea behind it is if you keep tapping there, it calms the body down, and it also calms the craving down. So if you really feel that your eating is an issue between now and the next video, just keep tapping and let me know if there's any difference. It might not be any change. As a rule, I think, you know what, my body's telling me I need chocolate for a reason. So that's how I kind of substantiate myself for eating the chocolate. So, But if it is becoming an issue for you and it's a real fear, then just tap on that point. Don't worry about any other points in the meantime, but just use that one for craving in the meantime. Until you get to the understanding as to the why you're craving it, what reasons, how you feel after you've had the said mentioned food, and we will look at that. What is your food that you can't resist? I know on previous workshops that I've had, a big thing is bread. People can't resist bread. It's like their go-to, it's their comfort, it's the warmth, it's the smell, it's everything that goes. So I'm going to ask you guys to make a note of what is it, what about your favorite food that you cannot do without, what benefits do you get from it? And I'm not talking about the torture afterwards. I'm saying, how do you feel? Is it a nice, soothing feeling? For me, it's just like that sweetness just does something to my brain. Now, chemically, we know it does. And chemically, I have gone into it because of having my diabetic husband at the time, when I would, really research the science behind the sugar. And I got a better, I could say, awareness of the biological responses to what happens. But then for me, the emotional responses are more important, because the biological responses make us eat, and we have to keep eating. And that's a given. But it's the overeating or the undereating or the eating the wrong foods that, to me, is where the mysteries lie. And I love the challenge of unraveling mysteries. I'm very good at jigsaw puzzles, and I do it online. So 21 days of self-isolation means there's going to be a lot of jigsaw puzzles played. But as a nice effect of that is, I like to see everything spread out. And even though it doesn't look like it's going to fit, it doesn't look logically, then basically it's going to be all put together. And the nice picture at the end is not even, for me, that's not the result. The challenge is finding, especially when it's all messy. And I like that with not only myself, my own emotional things, but also my clients. So that's what I really do enjoy, is I like finding out things that we think are not having any results on us, or not having any kind of effect. And then I like to link it to, hang on a minute, what about this? And so basically, we're looking at the jigsaw puzzle of the fat mind. Now, this was not a thought I ever had, because when I was young, I was a skinny kid, probably malnourished. So weight loss was just wasn't a thing. All my siblings were skinny. I'm one of 7. We were all very skinny and lean, and my mom had a little belly, but I mean, after having 7 kids now, you think, well, we thought she was fat, but she actually wasn't. And my dad was tall and lean, so most of the kids, we didn't have cars, so we'd run around. There was a lot more physical activity, so that probably added to the leanness. But I also didn't have much money to buy a lot of junk food. So as I got older, in my teenage years, when I started working, I realized that I could work a shift at the local Spar supermarket, and I would literally spend my money on sweets as a reward. And that was actually quite cool, because it was my money. I wasn't using pocket money. It was an extra. And it was like a secret, it wasn't secret, it was a pleasure. It was so when I left school and eventually got my job, and especially in the job in television, when there was that little bit extra cash coming in from time to time, from when we would travel or we would get a traveling allowance, I would find myself buying not just one chocolate, now I'd buy 3, and then I'd buy a yogi sit, and then go off and do my work, and it would be no problem. So I managed to stave off the bad side of sugar for most of my young life. And then when I married my husband, who is diabetic, and he had a very sweet tooth, I became very conscious now of eating sweet things. Now, I always felt guilty because he's not allowed to eat. So a couple of years back, I started looking into this, because he would often say to me, sugar's bad for you, sugar's bad for you. And I'm going, but no, it's not. And I'd had it at school, ironically enough. One of our school group friends, her mother was a Weight Watchers, and Weight Watchers was probably the inroads to the billion-dollar diet industry that there is. And her mother was a Weight Watchers group leader, and with this daughter would come to school, and she would talk all about calorie counting, and she had a little book, and and I'm going, oh no. Well, first of all, it just felt like work, and then just the PT to try and keep skinny. No, I just thought no. So but plus I didn't have that issue. So then she told me, no, you don't have a metabolism problem. You don't have an issue like this, but I've got this because my mum. And I just used to say, yeah, it was a lot of boring rubbish for me. But then when my husband had this medical condition, I started, obviously then the belief that sugar is good for me started to also take a dent. And through the years, I must have realized, I found myself, my belief was shifting. And this is why I do believe we can change our beliefs. I wrote a book once on sugar honey, which is not finished because it's still a work in progress, because I thought with the EFT, if I believe that the sugar is now bad for me, because my belief had changed, why can't I change the belief back? And I went into this exploration as to why the sugar and everything. And if you're interested, you can let me know. There is a big chunk in there which is worthwhile reading because it does give a little bit of a highlight. And we can make a plan and I can get it to you. At the end of the day, I'm writing a new one because in 2016 I went through the Banting health eating regime, shall we say, and I lost quite a lot of weight, but not because I was actually wanting to lose weight. I was just wanting to feel better when I was running because I felt flabby and I had all these issues. So that's my own personal journey with the sugar. There's more to come, obviously, and I will explain more as we go along. This being the first online meeting, I think that as the people start coming online and coming on board for the live calls, I will then directly have one-on-one questions with participants. But at the moment, it's just me yakking on like I can. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a summary of what to expect going forward. Oh, I didn't forget the fat brain, the FatMind. So just was very curious. Years ago, I met a young chap at the running club, and he told me that he'd lost an awful lot of weight, which was commendable. Everybody always celebrates you losing weight. And then I just asked him, because he had said something that triggered something for me, and my nosiness and my curiosity. I said to him, so do you still see yourself as overweight? And he said, yeah. He said in his mind, he cannot see the weight that he's lost. And even though he looks in the mirror and he can see a skinny person, in his mind, those neural pathways, those grooves in our brain, so to speak, have a certain image. Is how I look, either to myself. And even though he might see photographs, and even though he might see himself in the mirror, there was a part of his brain that's going, that's not him. And that's the part that I want to bring out of you, so that you can have a one-on-one chat to it on your own and uncover what is it doing, because basically it's there. Yes, it was years and years and years of habit and belief systems being grooved into the mind, but it's also serving you. And when we start to understand the purpose and the protection and the defense mechanism as to why it's there, it's easier for that part of our brain to go, oh, you mean I can let this go? And that, I think, is what a lot of the diets, well, they don't actually want you to change it because basically it serves them. It's got financial repercussions that, if you're going to get to your ideal weight now, probably, especially during a time like this, like lockdown period, by the end of lockdown period, you're probably going to need another diet program, which means more money spent. And one of the exercises I'm going to ask you to do is to also write down all the things that you've done and put a financial number to it. You can start thinking about that now, actually. How much money have you spent on trying to get to either your ideal weight or lose weight or look good for a wedding or look good for a do or look good for a party or just look good because there's a problem with how you currently look. So it was nice chatting. Hope to hear from you. If you've got any questions, please pop them on an email, and then I will try either answer them on email, and should the topic be, I think, of a general interest, then I'll bring it up in the meeting. Now, the 21 days ahead, I was looking up just before my conference started. They say 21 days is the best way to set a new habit, but it actually isn't necessarily true. It was derived from a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, written by Maxwell Maltz, which I did read a few years ago and I found it fascinating. But just remember, it was just his point of view. So 21 days to create a new habit is quite different if you're doing let's say smoking, which you're smoking a 30-day habit, 30 cigarettes a day. So by the end of one day, if you have not had a cigarette for 21 times, but we all know that's not true. So it depends on the individual. It also depends on if you're understanding why you've got that habit. Sometimes it's easier to let the habit go, because what this whole point of EFT and emotional energy healing that I do is to try and make you become self-aware. Because it's all very well me saying, oh, you're going to have another piece of cake, or oh, you're going to have another cigarette, oh, you're touching your face again. But if you don't have that self-awareness, I can stand on my head and point it out to you. It's going to take a lot longer that way. So basically what I want you to do is to go in here, and you've got plenty of time in the weeks ahead to understand. And look, it's going to get messy. It might, and that's why I never say stop your food yet. We need it. When you understand why you need it, you might eat it less. And the less you eat it, then the less you might need it. So I never tell anybody that's going to stop smoking or stop eating, or it's the same on the banting. I knew my mind. I knew when they said there's a red list and an orange list and a green list. And I looked at this red list, and there was obviously sugar and chocolate, and bread was on it. Like, bread wasn't a biggie for me, and I thought, I cannot say do not have this, because I know my mind, and I will not stop thinking about it if you tell me you can't have this. So basically, I said, I'm going to allow myself, but in moderation. I'm not going to cut it out. I'm going to cut back. So once a week, usually on a Sunday. Sunday at that stage, I was doing like ultra running, and we'd usually do the big high mileage run, usually on a Sunday. So I would say, you know what, if I feel like chocolate mousse from Woolworths, then chocolate mousse it is. If I feel like piece of Christmas cake, because I started my challenge during Christmas, which was very interesting because I didn't think I would get through Christmas without eating, and I didn't eat. So if I say to you, stop eating crisps, and that's all you've got, it ain't going to happen. And it's just extra torture, and it's extra punishment. And this whole premise, I don't want you to feel punished or pressurized anymore because you're doing enough of that yourself. You don't need me to say, you mustn't eat this and you shouldn't do that and don't do this. And in the course of the next 3 weeks, I also want you to start looking at your shoulds. What should you be doing? What should I be doing? Should I be doing this? And because then it's understanding that it's coming from an external source. The desire to do something is always far stronger than I should be doing this. So the desire for me to, for instance, this morning, the desire to go on the treadmill was far different than a couple of days ago when I hadn't got into the habit because of, oh, I should go run. Okay, but today I'm going, oh, hang on. Yesterday, after my run, this course idea came up. And then I had another thing come up because I went on the treadmill for half an hour. So this morning I was like, oh, what's going to happen this morning on the treadmill? So the desire is increased. So that's what I want to get with you, is the desire to change your thinking, first of all, primarily, because I think that in essence is the key in anything. So I'm looking forward to sharing these 3 weeks with you. I am actually going to send you a recording of this, and after the end of the 21 days of lockdown, and judging by, I'm going to work through what's worthwhile keeping and what's worthwhile dumping. And I'm also going to be doing this as a selling course, either through Udemy or Kajabi or somewhere more. But we'll see. I'll see the kind of value that I think is in it, and then hopefully get some feedback from you guys as to what value you found from it. So thanks for joining me, and we will chat tomorrow.